people of Reddit, what's your creepiest glitch in the Matrix or unexplainable thing that's ever happened to you? I died. I saw it. I lived it. Either it was another world with a version of me that died I saw, or I'm going crazy but I died. We had a pep rally in school, and after it was finished we had to go back to class. Well, my friend and I were not into that, so we wanted to across the street to Sonic. Across the school there is not heavy traffic, but if you don't pay attention you could get hit. Well, I remember walking with him, and he dropped something, so I went across the street first. I just saw a red Tahoe heading right for me, and I got hit. I remember everything. I remember gasping for air. I remember waking up and sleeping again. Then nothing. All of a sudden I was back in the stadium again, and the exact same words came out of the principal's mouth. My friend wanted to go get Sonic, but I was freaking out. Was asking him everything. I thought it had to be a dream, so I went with him, just to see what would happen. He dropped his stuff again and I waited. To my horror, that same red Tahoe showed up. I told him that I'm going back to school. I ain't dying again. I can still see the other version of me on that street just messed up. Not even moving. I was on vacation on Florida visiting a friend. We were walking on the beach on a perfectly sunny day when everything went black for a second. I think it was weird, but explained it away thinking that my eyes were playing tricks on me until he looked at me and said, "Did everything go black for a second?" The gods were quick saving the simulation. One day when I was about 8 I didn't go to school because I was sick. My friend was supposed to bring me homework etc, but he never came. My granddad came home from work and he told me that that friend was dead. I was devastated. That night I had a dream. I was with my friend at a playground next to our school and we were talking. Then he told me that he is safe and it didn't hurt when that car hit him. The next day my mother wanted to talk to me about that situation and she asked me if I wanted to know what happened. I told her that I know everything because my friend told me. She thought that my granddad told me, but he did not. He said that he did not wanted to tell me without her knowing it. That night I had a dream again and I was talking to him again. We were playing and having fun and he told me that he really had to go and we won't see each other ever again. The next day was his funeral and I really haven't had a dream about him ever since. I've told this story before. 4 years ago my childhood dog died very suddenly and unexpectedly. She was sick for a few days but turned it around and got better before dying very quickly and painfully in my dad's arms. I live out of state, so I wasn't able to be there for any of it. It's a 6-hour drive and I felt very guilty about her passing without me there. I had a very deep connection to her and she had been my best friend for 12 years. I was devastated by her death. I couldn't work or eat or do much of anything. I was constantly bursting into tears. It was just awful. My heart just ached and I found myself apologizing to her for not being there. I just felt so guilty. One night I had a dream about her. I dreamt I was in this empty space and Charlie came running up to me, whimpering excitedly. She was licking my face and generally just freaking out, and I was sobbing. I knew she was dead and I knew she was visiting me in my dream. I was very aware of it all. I kept hugging her and crying and apologizing, and she just kept licking my face and being affectionate. I woke up with tears streaming down my face and sat up in bed. I could still smell her distinctive smell, and on my sleeve I pulled off one of her hairs. She had never been to my apartment and I hadn't seen her recently. It wasn't a cat hair either, as Charlie was a collie mix and their fur pattern is very distinctive. It may all be coincidence, but it was so vivid and real. I like to think she was visiting to let me know everything is okay and to not worry. I haven't had a dream like that since. Might get buried, but oh well. When I played baseball as a kid, they were handing out the trophies at the end of the season. They called out the names of the kids while we received our trophies. There happened to be a kid with the same name as me. We met after the ceremony because it was weird since our last name isn't a very common one. We had the same birthday and everything. We looked alike. Both our dads were named Derek and both of our sisters were named Lily. As a kid, I found it cool. As an adult, I find it cool and also disturbing. Not my story, but my grandpa's. So he served in the Navy and hadn't come home for 5 years. He finally got to go home and on his way, he saw his old friend, let's call him Wally. Wally was getting on his normal bus, and my grandpa shouted hi to him. But Wally didn't respond. But he didn't think much of it, seeing how Wally didn't have the best hearing. Wally got on his bus and looked my grandpa in the eye as the bus drove away. Later, after he got home and was talking to his dad, he asked him how Wally was doing and told his dad about how he saw him earlier. His dad was silent for a minute and asked him if he was sure he saw Wally. My grandpa said yes, and his dad replied, Wally died 6 months ago. This summer I bought my girlfriend a last-minute birthday trip to go kayaking around the San Juan Islands off the Washington state coast. After a long drive and ferry trip, we found a tour group of about 20 people and were then shuffled into a shuttle van for a ride to the beach. Now, my girlfriend has a unique name similar to the name of a famous painter. Let's say it's Rebecca Warhill just for fun. It's not. She's a little ray of sunshine, and started chatting with the middle-aged woman sitting next to her on the shuttle as we waited to leave. The woman noted that she had always loved the name Rebecca, as it was her mother's name. They made pleasant small talk in the van until the tour guide passed around the sign-in sheet for all of us to fill out. That's when things got strange. My girlfriend wrote her full name on the sheet and passed it on to the woman, who immediately shouted "Oh my god" and started crying. After a few minutes of total confusion, she told us Rebecca Warhill was my mother's full name, and these islands were her favorite place in the world. She passed away this summer from cancer, and we've traveled hundreds of miles to spread her ashes here. We were stunned. I literally picked a random date, time, and tour company, and then we were split into the same group as this woman, and my girlfriend was sitting right next to her on the shuttle. What the hell? She continued by saying, my daughter told us that Nana Rebecca would be with us on this trip, and I didn't believe it until now. It was the most unbelievable coincidence we had ever experienced, and has totally convinced me that there's more to this world than we think. As my brother later said, the universe winked at us that day. I shared this a few years ago when this question was asked last time, and didn't really realize how glitchy in the matrix it was until people started commenting haha. In college, I took a hard news/soft news journalism class where one of the assignments was to write an obituary for one of my grandparents. The professor told us to write it on a deceased grandparent, but if all of your grandparents were still alive we had to choose one. In my case, all of my grandparents were alive. I procrastinated actually doing the assignment until the night before it was due because it seemed like a morbid assignment, especially once all of my grandparents were still alive. Scramming for an easy grandparent to write about, I gave my mom a call and asked her for some basic biographical information about my maternal grandfather. As we were talking about my grandpa's career, my mom couldn't recall the name of one of the companies he worked at. She lectured me about waiting until the last minute to write the assignment because it was late, 10:30 p.m. my grandpa's time. However, she said she would give him a call to see if he was still awake and be able to answer that question once my assignment was due the following morning. When my mom called my grandpa, my grandma answered the phone in a panic. My grandma frantically explained that the paramedics had just arrived and were performing CPR on my grandpa because he had stopped breathing and lost consciousness. My mom was able to stay on the phone with my grandma until they took my grandpa to the hospital, where he was declared dead. In the time my mom and I had been talking on the phone about my grandpa's obituary, he was dying. His death was entirely unexpected at that. Although he was in his 80s, he was the healthiest of my grandparents at the time. We ended up using the obituary I wrote for that writing assignment as his actual obituary. Still freaks me out when I think about the timing. Reminds me a bit of this time when I was a kid. I had this little joke novelty thing I'd gotten at a magic shop while on vacation. This was actually so long ago I forget exactly what the thing was supposed to resemble, but it was something you were supposed to open. And it had this plastic thing inside suspended on a rubber band. You were supposed to wind this thing up and close it. You hand it to your friend. They open it, which releases tension, allowing the plastic thing to spin around, rattling loudly against the plastic case, and vibrating in their hand, scaring the shit out of them. Anyway, I got all my relatives with this thing, because I was a funny little 10-year-old shit. My great aunt and uncle were up visiting and staying at my grandparents' house. I had the thought to try this trick on my great aunt, but something stopped me. It didn't feel right, and I very clearly had the thought I don't want to give her a heart attack. No idea why. She was a bit older, but so were my grandparents, who I already tricked. Well, very shortly after they returned home, I get news that my great aunt has had a heart attack and passed away. Seemed like a spooky coincidence, so that one's always stuck with me. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.